Welcome to another Uniforms of the Screen. With the release of The Rise of Skywalker this month, we decided to finally jump into the big one, Star Wars. Now, just about everyone knows of Star Wars, but what's not widely known is that the costuming fan base behind it can be extremely detail-oriented and meticulous when it comes to screen accuracy. That being said, we're going to start off with a simpler costume, that of the first human characters ever seen in a Star Wars movie, the Rebel Fleet Troopers, also known as the Alderaanian Consular Security. Since this is our first video covering Star Wars, it's important we preface the actual topic with the costuming community surrounding the franchise. Star Wars has perhaps the largest and most diverse community when it comes to costuming and recreating uniforms and props. With a lot of different groups representing the Empire, the Rebellion, Mandalorians, and so on, there are a number of uniform standards, requirements, and tiers of certifications. Assuming you want to join one of the groups, that is. On the Imperial side, you have armor, helmets, weapons, and uniforms, all of which are very specific and well documented. These are known and accurately reproduced because they were mainly custom made or modified in large numbers, meaning originals have been readily available to certain individuals to recreate. However, when it comes to the Rebels and more cloth-based costumes like aliens and other things of that nature, it's a little bit different. Though a lot were still custom made, they're not as readily available because there were just fewer quantities of them. That, coupled with the age of the movies, has left very few pieces to base recreations on. Because of this, people putting these costumes together have had to rely on mainly screen grabs, pictures of rarer pieces when they are on display, and reference books like Star Wars Costumes: The Original Trilogy. This most often results in minor differences among an individual's recreations, such as fabric types, colors, and minor design differences. This leads us back to the Rebel Fleet Trooper, which sort of falls into that category. So let's actually get started here. During the period of the Galactic Civil War, the Alliance to Restore the Republic, better known simply as the Rebel Alliance, was composed of a number of rebel factions and units operating on different planets and in terrains, all with different operational styles. However, as the Alliance grew, some infantry and ground forces slowly saw a bit of uniformity in their equipment, gear, and outfits. Perhaps the most formally and best dressed was that of the Alderaanian Consular Security Force. These soldiers originally were tasked with guarding ships, installations, and protecting VIPs for the Alderaanian government, but slowly began to more directly incorporate themselves into the rebellion as its size grew. Eventually, many rebel factions, particularly ones on board rebel ships and at bases such as Yavin 4, would adopt their uniforms as standard issue. Although technically non-consular security-inspired fleet troopers such as the ones seen in Star Wars Rebels exist, when one hears Rebel Fleet Trooper, usually the image of the Alderaanian variant is thought of. Anyway though, first seen in 1977's Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope, and then again in 2016's Rogue One A Star Wars Story, these troopers are now well known, even with their relatively short screen time. These troopers have had quite a few designations over the years, such as Rebel Marines in 2005's Star Wars Battlefront 2, Alliance Fleet Troopers, and eventually the official title of Alderaanian Consular Guard. However, today they are simply referred to as Rebel Fleet Troopers, or RFT. We'll start off with the primary variant seen throughout the franchise, then cover the specialty variant, referred to as RFT MPs, or Military Police, seen briefly in Rogue One. Starting down at the feet, you'll need a pair of black leather mid-calf length boots. No specific brand or model has been identified for them, but based on the adjustment strap across the top, they are likely a form of engineer's boot. These are easy to source on eBay, but will vary in cost depending on the source and size. Moving up are the pants. These are rather straightforward. They are a basic light gray pair that sport 2 cargo pockets on the legs. Most people will just grab a pair of US BDU pants as they fit the design nearly perfectly. Hopping over to their weapons, we have their go-to firearm, the Blastech DH-17 blaster pistol. These were actually based off the British Sterling L2A3 submachine gun with an attached single-point articulated eye gun sight, or OEG for short, as its scope. Today, it's a bit hard to track down and convert originals to them, but various types of replicas can be found online. Just be sure to get the proper one, as there are 2 versions of these seen in the original trilogy. The first version, which are used primarily by fleet troopers, and the second, which can be seen in The Empire Strikes Back, being used by trench troopers on Hoth. These are carried in custom-made brown leather holsters which hang from belts of the same color. Two variants of the holsters were used, one which hangs a little lower by way of two loops similar to other ones used by rebels as well as Imperial forces, and the more commonly seen one, which sits a little higher and sees the belt fed completely through it. The general consensus is the belts themselves are around 1 3/4 to 2 inches wide. As for the buckles, these were all metal and shaped in what can best be described as an elongated hexagon. Additionally, on the belt, you'll occasionally see square boxes. These were likely meant to be rations or small equipment canisters. These are made out of aluminum, and to be screen accurate, you'll need 2 of them. Next is the bluish-gray sleeve shirt. These boasted something of a full-chested bib, and because of that, require a little customization if you plan to go the handmade route. Originals appear to be very similar to Navy dungarees with a few modifications. This brings us to the next piece, the vest. These were all black and on the front featured 3 pouches with tab closures and 1 large pocket on the left side, as well as 4 pockets on the right. On the back, there were 2 large pockets, one towards the shoulders, which was split in 2, and 1 long one at the bottom of the vest, split into 3 sections. Sounds a little confusing. Well, it sort of is, and for quite a while, many people were just using repurposed BDU jackets. But thanks to Prop Store, more information, including high-resolution photos, showed just how detailed they really were. Finally, for the original uniform, we have perhaps the most recognizable part, the helmet. These are very memorable and interesting helmets, to say the least, but they actually have a bit of a history that goes as far back as World War II in a way. The main portion of the helmet is actually modeled off the U.S. Navy's Mark II Talker helmet. First seen in 1942, these were primarily used by radio operators aboard Navy ships. Interestingly enough, this helmet would be the basis for a number of ones seen throughout the original trilogy, such as Rebel hangar technicians, Imperial gunners, and Navy troopers, to name a few. Anyway though, the shape was modified and vacuum-formed, with the rear fin portion added along with a side radio box and front visor. A small bit of information that's not widely known is that the original helmets were actually light gray in color, but showed up as a white in the movie. Now, there are technically 2 versions of this helmet worn by the fleet troopers. One, which is the standard version, known as the fleet helmet, which has the visor up, and the Defender helmet, where the visor is in a downward fixed position, which covers the upper part of the wearer's face. These were predominantly seen mixed in during the medal ceremony at the end of A New Hope. The first version can be sourced very easily online through various sellers on Etsy, eBay, and even through Facebook groups. The second one, though nearly identical, isn't as easily found, but it can be modified somewhat easily from a fleet helmet. The original creator, Andrew Ainsworth, does still make both versions and offers them on his website, originalstormtrooper.com. Is that all for headwear?
No. There is another.
Correct. Technically, there is one final piece, Fleet Troopers wore. Going back to the medal ceremony scene, if you look very carefully, you can see Fleet Troopers wearing a beige-colored hat. One might think that's just a goof or continuity error. Well, no, actually in 2011, Fleet Trooper figures were made which included that hat. Here's a photo of the exact style cap. These are not very easy to come by, as they were for another Rebel trooper seen even less in the movie that isn't as popular to recreate. On the topic of obscure, where would we be without mentioning the spike pole and hand scanner seen by the fleet trooper in the tower on Yavin 4? The pole was never really seen in detail, but people have made relatively close reproductions on the cheap. As far as the hand scanner, the one used in the original movie was actually a bunch of light meters and production equipment taped together. If you want to build your own or buy kits to these, links to threads for each will be in the description. Now, in Rogue One specifically, there were 2 versions of the traditional Fleet Troopers seen. The first was the standard member as seen in A New Hope. These guys were primarily seen at the end of the movie with the now famous Vader hallway scene. Though it's hard to tell, some have pointed out it appears that a few vests had what looked like 2 magazine pouches rather than the traditional 3. However, the biggest difference came with the second version of Fleet Troopers, seen very briefly in the Yavin 4 base. These units had a slightly modified helmet which sported 2 main differences, as well as the addition of an armband. With regards to the helmet, the first difference was the inclusion of 2 decals located on the right side, and the second being the addition of a black rubber stripe below the visor. These were also more well-worn and dirty than the ones worn by fleet-based units. Now, the armbands had an olive green base with a white square stencil showcasing 2 additional decals. In the description, you can find a link to a bunch of files one can use to easily recreate these. Finally, if you're looking for one place to get most of these parts, you can check out Imperial Boots. They've recently added a bundle package. Link to it as well as other vendors will be in the description, as always. Now, if you want to look more into these uniforms, need extra help, or just want to join a community, there are a few Facebook groups and websites you can check out. First up is Launch, a Fleet Trooper costuming group. This one primarily focuses on the RFTs. Another is Star Wars Kit Finders. This is a great general purpose group that has a constantly updated vendor list for just about everything related to Star Wars costumes and props. And finally, you have the Rebel Legion, one of the larger fan groups that covers everything from Jedi to Rebel technicians. Alrighty, that'll do it for the Fleet Trooper uniform. Now you're probably wondering what's going on with this pixel animation. Well, over the past few months, I've been helping a friend produce an adaptation of the 5-issue Star Wars comic series Han Solo in pixel animation form. We've spent countless hours crafting the locations, ships, characters, and action from not only the comic, but the movies and expanded universe as well. So if you like Star Wars, animation, or the retro pixel format, you can check it out on the YouTube channel Inside the Box Animations. Link to the channel will be in the description, as well as at the end of the video. This will be the last video we do for 2019, so we want to thank everyone who subscribed and watched over the past year. 2020 is looking pretty interesting, and we will see the start of a slew of new content. But until then, be sure to subscribe or check back real soon for more videos, right here on Uniform History.